Hi Andy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. This
Good.
whole series is getting like a momentum. We had five, I think, or six meetings by now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of enjoying it.
I've loved listening to it. They've been amazing. I thought this afternoon was incredible.
Well, thank you. Boedi Wijaya is really a great artist and a good
Yeah.
speaker. So thank you so much for taking the time and being with us and sharing with us your thoughts and your art. This series is called 2020 Online, and it's an attempt to see where artists are now, what they're doing now, all over the world. How does the situation of the COVID affect their work, affect them? And we have a great partner of the Lambert Center for Art and Ideas at the JCC Manhattan. Is partnering with the Jerusalem Biennale in this series. And tonight we have Andi Arnovitz as our interview. I'm gonna introduce you shortly. Andy was born in Kansas City, in the US. She lives now in Jerusalem for quite a while. Andy is a conceptual artist. She uses etching, digital information, and various printmaking processes, as well as fabric and thread to create both print series, artist books, and large-scale installations. Her work is exploring various tensions that exist within religion, gender, and politics. And she have works all over the place: England, China, the US, Israel, Spain, Poland, Germany, Finland, France, and many, many more places. And I must say, Andy is also a great, great partner of the Jerusalem Biennale from the very beginning, of Biennale 2013. So, Andy, how are you those days?
I'm okay. You know, like everybody, I'm kind of navigating this pandemic. We've had all of our children and grandchildren.
Because I had found a way of testing the sound someplace around.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute this.
Okay.
Opa. I'm sorry. Let's start again.
That's okay. So we've kind of had extremes with the pandemic. We had all of our children and grandchildren living with us for about a month. So whereas everyone else was kind of navigating being alone, we were navigating trying to find some space to be alone. And then about 2.5 weeks ago, everybody went home. And so I've just started coming back into the studio and working. It's really a very strange time. It's a very, very strange time. There are some parts of it that are incredible. I think life slowing down to a much more even pace. I think a lack of distractions. The quiet has been unbelievable in the mornings and in the evenings.
But you
So
mean
there have been
the
all
quiet,
kinds of
you mean inside and outside? Or like?
Inside and outside. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, but where I live, like I had no idea that there were roosters living so near our house. I mean, we've lived here 15, almost 16 years, and in the mornings now we hear roosters crowing, which I've never heard before. So it's little things like that, I think, that are, you know, that's maybe some of the unexpected, nicer things that have happened.
Are there any worries? Any new worries?
Oh, funny you asked that, Rami. So actually a curator posted my worry bead project on Facebook, and I said, you know what, it's time to make new worry beads. And I see that Mallory's here. So Mallory's a ceramicist, These are some of the worry beads. Mallory helps me produce these worry beads. And I sat down and literally in 2 seconds, I came up with 20 new worry beads. Okay. I mean, we've got obviously COVID-19, loss of smell, shortness of breath, biological warfare, you name it. We have 20 new worry beads in the making.
So it's definitely affects your work and get into your work. And I just mentioned that this project, the Worry Beads, was exhibited in the first Jerusalem Biennale in 2013.
Right.
I will always remember it as one of the strongest, more powerful installation that we had in such a new thing. It was so fresh. We never did anything before that. And we started the Biennale, and that was like a main part of it, exhibiting in the Achim Hasid complex before it became like anything. So there's many worries, and there's worries that are now adding. But then there's, can you tell us a little bit, besides like your own experience, what is the feeling like in Jerusalem? Like not in Jerusalem in general, what is the sentiment like? What do people think around you? How is the quarantine? But also, what do you feel like about the Jerusalemite art scene here in Jerusalem?
So that's kind of a multi-layered, complex question. So first of all, I think Jerusalem is just starting to open back up. We've had some serious lockdowns here. And also Jerusalem, everybody knows, is an incredibly complicated city. So what I feel in Baca and you feel in Katamon and the German colony is nothing like Mea Sharim, which is nothing like East Jerusalem. You've got a very complicated city. It's not like Tel Aviv. And so Jerusalem is one of the hot spots of the virus in the whole state of Israel, but you don't feel it where I live at all. And in fact, we live really close to the Mesilah, the long park that was built along the train tracks. And today there were millions of people out, people having picnics, people strolling, people on bicycles. I don't know because I'm not there, but I would venture to say that Mea Sharim does not feel like that right now. So I think things are starting to open up. I'm always deeply concerned about culture. Today is the first time I have heard a whisper of museums opening up. It was like the very last sentence in an article about how the Ministry of Health and the government are planning to slowly stage a reopening of things. And at the very end of one of the last sentences, it said, and museums. And I've been waiting to hear, museums and art galleries. How that's going to happen, I don't know. I don't know if it's really fair for me to speak for every artist here in Jerusalem. I have kind of a unique situation because my studio is in my house. So I don't have, even if there's a total lockdown, I can get to my studio. There are issues. You can't get art supplies. I mean, you can't get art supplies. The art supply store hasn't been open and Amazon stopped shipping. And if you run out of something, you're out of it, which is, on the one hand, it's a problem. On the other hand, you get kind of creative and maybe you dig into drawers and you find things you didn't know you had, or you suddenly decide you're going to start using a material that you haven't used in years. I think most of the artists that I know have been very productive and have stayed really busy.
Well, from the few artists that I spoke with, some said they're in a complete block. They've just stopped everything, and all they do is just arranging their closets and going over all the, and the other kind is like people that became like really intensively productive and find this situation like as an inspiration maybe to work and get some new ideas and new artworks out there. And I think from the conversation that we had before that, it's not only that you are now relating to the situation and creating, it started even before the COVID actually broke out, right? There's a few artworks that you started long time ago. Maybe we should show them and talk about those.
Sure. Let's start. I think the work is much more interesting in my face.
So let me find it.
So maybe I'll just do a general sort of introduction, which is starting last August, which is a little bit creepy. I started to deal with disease, and I started a series called Epidemiology. That's actually a new work. But I was looking at the sources of disease on a cellular level. And okay, so this is one of a series that I've started. And I'm really investigating the body and how things happen inside the body, and how even disease can be very beautiful. We had some friends that became quite ill and some family members, and I started to literally do a Google search of what certain cells look like. You know, what an ovarian cyst looks like, what a salivary gland tumor looks like, what pancreatic cancer looks like. I started to Google all of these things, and it turns out that on the cellular level, these things are quite beautiful. And I think all of us have seen graphics of the COVID virus, that sort of round ball with these little knobby things coming off of it. And if you didn't know what it was, it just is sort of a graphic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I began investigating. And then, like, explaining this piece, I have osteoporosis. It's not debilitating, but it's also not particularly fun. And so I started to investigate that. And if you look at the pictures of the close-up microscopic pictures of what osteoporosis in a bone looks like, it's gorgeous. It's really beautiful. And so this piece is really about that. It's also about menopause and what having lots and lots of children does to a woman's body. This is actually one of two pieces that are currently in the trespassing show at the Islamic Museum that I'm pretty sure most of the show is online now.
But it was open for quite a while before it closed.
Yeah,
right?
it was. It was open for several months. It was, and it was supposed to be there until May. Again, these museums are, I don't think any of us realize the juggle that they're all doing right now. Postponing, extending, guaranteeing loans for works for longer. I mean, I think there's a lot of things going on in the museums behind the scenes.
But there's a lot about timing, I feel like I'm lucky in a big way and unlucky in a small way because the Jerusalem Biennale was happening in the end of 2019 and we finished it before the whole thing started. I just don't want to imagine what would happen if this whole COVID would break out before or just as part of the Biennale. But on the other hand, we opened an exhibition just before Purim with Idon Noy and Mimi Shamir curating, and was open literally for the opening event, and then it shut down. So in that way, I think this exhibition is like the lucky ones. It had its time.
So this is another one that has to do with how many eggs a woman has and the cycles of fertility. But Rami, I want to go back to what you were saying, which is I think that, I've talked about this a little bit about the the painfulness of this lockdown. Take, for example, if you're a museum curator and you've been planning a show for 5 years and you've secured the loans to borrow the paintings from other major museums, and you've gotten the funders, and the whole thing is sitting in the basement and no one has seen it. Like there's a lot of, I just really hope that everybody is going to support culture in a big way when we're back and allowed to, because I think that there's so much effort that goes into these things. And I think it has to be very frustrating right now.
This is beautiful. Is this like, it's paper, right? You use paper?
So almost everything I do uses paper and layers. These particular pieces, they're very, very big. I mean, this piece is about 1.20 by 90, I want to say. They're all light boxes. There's something about a light box and images on a light box that immediately bring to mind X-rays and transparency and looking deeply inside the human body. I mean, we all have experienced that bizarre feeling of looking at an X-ray of our own bodies, because it's the parts of ourselves that we never see. And it's a weird awareness. And so I found that working on light, and these look very different when the lights are not on. The colors, everything changes completely when the lights are on. But I love the transparency, and I love the ability to layer, and I loved the sort of the ephemeralness of it. But also for me, it feels very body-like.
And you feel like one more piece of this series will be the Corona? Because it's like a way to...
So I already did it.
Ah, really?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
So if you keep going through some of these images, like now this one is older. This relates to the morning blessings and how we bless everything in our body working, and the cycles of our bodies. But maybe go to the next image. So this was part of the Monofilm Festival that happened in October. And the piece on the left, the slides, and I think I sent you a close-up. I don't know if you have it nearby.
This one.
That's one. So this was called Smears and Stains. And these are watercolors, but it was about how when you're looking very, very closely at something, it loses the initial significance of it, and it becomes something visually very beautiful. And then go back to the first one. And then this one on the light box with the giant magnifying glasses was called Epidemiology, which now everybody knows what that means because of COVID. But in October, not very many people had heard of it. And this was really about disease on a cellular level. And I guess I have to say for a few minutes, I have to talk about process, because disease in general, it feels like something just goes wrong at some point in our bodies. Something random or something alien infiltrates and things go wrong. So when I'm working with watercolors, what I started to find was that if I spread an enormous amount of water on the page, and then I dipped a loaded brush with pigment into that water, you could do the exact same color in the exact same amount of water 20 times, and each time it would look different. It was a random thing that happened every time. It was kind of like a Zen watercolor practice. And that's really how the second piece started. Maybe go to the next work.
But I want to ask you about how did you get to dealing with epidemiology or epidemic? Like, does the effect that you just described about the colors drove you to think about epidemic, or it's just something else?
No, it's the other way around. It was the other way around. It really was first of all, I think for most artists, whatever we're obsessed about, certainly for me, whatever I'm worried about, whatever I'm obsessed about becomes art. Sooner or later, it becomes art that I'm working on. That's how I work through my angst, and how I think I become livable to other family members. And starting in the late summer, I mean, there were people that I was close to that became ill or developed issues. And instead of wringing my hands, I just started to look at what those things looked like up close. And I found them incredibly interesting and beautiful in their own strange way. And I started to think about how they were artistic and beautiful, and how I could explore that, duplicate that, reproduce that, make awareness out of that. And the Mana Film Festival this year was all about medical. I mean, in a way, it was like very oddly foretelling, because the entire festival for that was medical.
And this series is also connected? The one
So this is something I actually did at the beginning of the COVID lockdown.
Okay.
And this one and the piece that's after this is about osteoporosis. I mean, this is really about brittle, porous bones. And I mean, I haven't ever looked at my own bones, but if they tell you that you have osteoporosis, it is something like this. And at the same time, you know, I love paper, and I love working with paper. And so I like to manipulate the paper. And I also like to take paper and manipulate it so much, so far that you don't know that it's paper anymore. And I know that when I posted these works on Instagram, I got a lot of questions like, what is that that you're working with? But it's just plain old watercolor paper, but it's been poked and had holes punched out of it, and watercolored and cut, and you know, played with and arranged so that you don't really know what it is anymore, which I love. I mean, I love when something, you know, the image becomes more powerful than the material. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you feel like how important you feel is the looking on the actual artwork then versus like looking at the visual? I spoke about it with many of the artists, and it's now it's an issue. I think it's a real issue because, you know, we could have sat in your studio basically and go over those works, and then I kind of feel like I miss the feeling of like seeing closely the work and feeling the texture. And so how do you feel the work is transmitted through the online medium?
So I think this is like one of the most important questions of this entire period, which is, how do you share art digitally? And can you come close to the experience of standing in front of something? And I've been part of several conversations about this over time, but I think some is better than none. I mean, I think to just shut down and say, okay, well, you can't see the paintings, and you're never going to get close to this piece of paper, and you can't walk around the sculpture, so we're just going to shut the doors. I don't think that's a good answer. I think it's much better to try. I also think, you know, that there are some media that are much more successful. I mean, if you're a video artist,
You're on it.
Great, you know. But I think that if you're a paper artist or a painter or sculptor, this is particularly challenging. And I think, you know, for some of us, we're not great photographers. You know, I'm not a great photographer. I don't know how to control lighting. I don't think I take very good pictures of my work. I mean, thank God I have an iPhone. I mean, it does a pretty good job despite me. But I really don't know. I think we're going to have to think very hard about how to present art. So first of all, even though I think of myself as an optimist, I don't think this thing is over. I mean, everything I'm reading is that, you know, there's going to be another wave of it. So I think that we can't just, you know, forget about this situation. I think we have to think hard that if we're in this situation again, how do we share art and theater and music and ballet? Like, how do we access that on some level of enjoyment? How can we even come close to the experience of what it's like in real time, right in front of you? And I think, I don't think we're ever going to duplicate 100% the experience of standing next to a painting.
Then the next question is, basically we were speaking about the work process. And then I'm sure as an artist, you're drawn to create things that sometimes you do not think about, you just do it.
Right.
But then the question is, if this question that we were just talking about the fact that more things are now online, is it in there in the back of your mind, and you start maybe thinking, maybe I should go more to create things that are easier to share online, or because we saw two different works of yours. We saw one that was created before the COVID, and we saw one that you started actually just after. Does it become part of your process?
Did you think there was a difference between the two pieces?
I actually was surprised that the second series was also very inviting to touch and inviting to really feel like,
Right.
and not really like, but I'm thinking maybe this whole phenomena that we're all shifting to the online is becoming part of what artists have in the back of their mind when they create.
So there's something very inauthentic about doing art in a way just so that a lot of people can see it. And I don't think very many artists are specifically working in a given media just because they know it's easy for a lot of people to see. I mean, I hope not.
Mm-hmm.
I hope not. I mean, I think that most artists make because they have to. And I think they go to their comfort zone, like the places that are comfortable for them to create, or the places where they create, you know, without having to think about it. I mean, I always wonder about doing a video. I'm starting to think a little bit about stop motion for a specific project that I'm doing. And I have to say, the funny thing is, I understand exactly how a video is made. I mean, I was in advertising. I shot television commercials. It's not like I don't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never had an idea that I thought, oh, that has to be a video.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you do a video because that's the only way to express an idea, is in motion, in a video.
Okay.
Oh.
So let's get back to the work and see this.
Okay. So this is a piece that I finished several months ago, I think probably in November. And this is called Epidemiology. And this is all about cells breaking down on the cellular level. It's a very big piece. I mean, I would say that it's like, you know, 1.40 meters, maybe 1.20 meters, something like that. It's, again, this is a light box, and you can go to the next one. I think I gave you some close-ups.
Yeah, this is a close-up.
Okay, and I also, I use watercolor, I use salt. Okay, so this, I mean, this is sort of creepy because these look like COVID virus cells, but this was done, you know, months and months and months ago. But you can see the randomness of the watercolors,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see what happens. And for me, this is just an echo of how disease begins. Okay, so this one, Rami, can you find the image of it, of just the box sitting on the floor?
Yeah,
There.
this one.
Okay. So I had this crazy idea that I wanted to be peering inside the human body, like a scope, kind of. And I came up with this sort of weird idea of creating a box, a light box, that had plexiglass shelves in it, so that each shelf would be a layer. Now you can go to the close-ups. Okay. So there's layers inside this box. And for me, I wanted to somehow duplicate the experience of going deep inside the human body. All of us have seen those movies at like Disney World and that kind of thing. And again, there's a lot of synchronicity, like there's some pieces of lace in here that I cut apart and watercolored that mimic the COVID virus, you know, the way those particles look. So this was one, yeah. And then after that, let's go to the one that shows the box, so everybody can kind of have a sense of.
This one.
No, there should be one of sneeze of that box. Do we have that somewhere?
Yeah.
There.
This one.
Okay. So this was one that I guess I started, at the very, very beginning of COVID, when it was, you know, way before we were under lockdown. But this is called Sneeze. And now you can go to the close-up of it. This just gives context. Yeah. And again, this is the layers of a sneeze. I mean, we've now seen that image of how a sneeze spreads, you know, it leaves our mouth and it spreads and it goes so far. So this was my creative sort of artistic way of showing that sneeze. Only now that sneeze is lethal.
And takes like the worst nightmare of our time to become like a beautiful art piece.
Okay. I mean,
no, because we're all walking in the street and we're terrified that someone will sneeze. I was just in the super and, you know, I don't have COVID, but I sneezed and everyone was like terrified.
Well, and also like it's allergy season.
Exactly.
You know?
For me every year.
It's like you want to wear a t-shirt that says, no, I just have allergies. So yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so we can talk about this too.
This is a different, but it's also a sneeze, right? This is
also a sneeze. This is a mobile. And the movie doesn't work, right?
We can try. Last time I tried to do like a film, like a movie. It didn't work. Let's give it a shot.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to.
It's okay. I can talk about it. So I decided that a sneeze has motion, and that it's like a moving thing. Let's see if it works.
Do you see it? Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. Okay, so again, now we're going to go back to this thing where, you know, I'm limited by what I have in my studio. So I have a very cheap lamination machine, but I don't have any way of fabricating a frame. So I took screening that I found in the garage and I stapled it to an old picture frame, and I set it up between two stools, which actually, if you look at me when this is all done, there's like a table back here where you've got two stools with this screen suspended on it. But if I open the window or if someone walks into the room, the entire sneeze starts to move. And I mean, I guess it's just, you know, it's like taking something that we're all aware of, that we're all dealing with, and making it an artistic experience.
And this is just like probably just a beginning, because it can end up to be an installation in a full room
Yeah,
like we
it
did
would
in
be
20.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, you know me. I mean, if it works small, it's even better if it's a whole room.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also think, I mean, there's something about transparency. There's something about lamination. Maybe go to the other still picture of it if you can find it.
Yeah.
Where we take something that's very mundane. There we go, and somehow express it artistically, creatively, graphically. And you can imagine that when these are gently moving, this thing hovering in the air, it was just me exploring this thing that we've all become so afraid of.
Mhm. So I think before we go to the level of like discussing a little bit about the role of artists in this situation and what artists can do, and maybe a little bit of the politics and a little bit about your projection about the future, maybe now it's a good time to see if there's anyone with a question.
Sure.
So let's open it up, and if there's anyone who wants to ask a question, just give me a sign. How do we do it? Maybe through the chat. If there's anyone that listens to us and have a question about this part.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we can go on.
Yeah.
So there was a few more artworks that you wanted to show. Let's see.
I think there were some small paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And we can go back to the black and white one too.
Oh, now we're going back.
This is so this is, oh, okay. All right, this is fine. We can stop here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a watercolor and collage and ballpoint pen. And I would say of everything I've done, this is, you know, I think that we're all struggling with this thing that we can't see that is so horrible. First of all, there is such a disconnect, at least here in Israel, because the weather is beautiful. The sun is shining. Everything is blooming. Everything is green. And yet we all have to walk around with gloves and a mask because there's this thing in the air that can kill us. And I think that there's something terrifying about this, something like science fiction. And I think everybody's struggling with this because there's such a disconnect between the reality that our eyes see and the reality of this disease and how it's spread and where it goes. And I think that this watercolor collage, for me, expresses that, how things bleed into other things, and it's in the atmosphere, and it mutates, and at the same time, like, there's some kind of beauty in all of this. So
yeah, I think totally the big issue of us as people that are as dealing with visuals, like that's what we do. We're dealing with visuals, and now we're facing this mega event, which is so strong, but the visuals are very limited. Like, you can't really get anything like to see. But then I feel like your artwork is kind of helping us to imagine, and not only to imagine, but also take this horrifying thing and make it beautiful.
yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful, but it's also creepy. I mean, there's something about this that's a little bit creepy. I mean, I don't think you look at this and think beautiful sunsets and
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful beach. I mean, there is something about this that's disconcerting. I think the same is, maybe if you go to one of the other ones. Oh, this is from the Smears and Stains.
It seems like this is the last one, but exactly now we get a question from Vera Pilpul on WhatsApp, on Facebook, and
Okay.
she's asking exactly about the importance of beauty in your work. Like, is it important at all? Is it an issue?
So, I mean, for me in general, the seduction of the viewer visually is very, very important to me. I mean, I think that it's important to pull the viewer in visually first, and then to push back with an idea or a concept or something that they don't know or something horrible. But for me as an artist, my go-to position is to seduce the viewer visually first. Like to either draw them in with the richness of the material or the color palette or the textures of something, or that something looks like ceramic but it's really paper, or you know, or some of the installations that I've done, you know, the porcelain fish for the Biennale, like that somehow you overwhelm the viewer visually on some level, and then they stop short and go, oh my God, what is that? You know, for example, the sneeze, like, well, that it looks interesting. It looks cool. Oh, it's about a sneeze. So yeah, I mean, for me, the beauty, I think it's very important. And I actually wonder sometimes about the future of art. I wonder for how long our tolerance of ugly, crude art is going to last. I wonder, as the world gets more difficult and more unhealthy and more violent and more of all these negative things, I wonder how much our tolerance for art that is also ugly and violent and in your face is going to be viewed as a form of entertainment. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't think there's a place for it. I do. But me personally, I want something that's aesthetically pleasing, but also meaningful.
But that's almost forbidden, at least in the Israeli art field, the local contemporary art. It's almost forbidden to do anything which is aesthetic, which is beautiful, right? It's like feeling, that's the feeling.
It's a big problem. I mean, in general, I would say up until the last 5 years, it's suicide to do anything that's just beautiful for beauty's sake, and also anything that celebrates Judaism, that celebrates being Jewish. I mean, those were forbidden. That was just suicide to do anything like that. I do think that I've seen an opening in the last 5 years where the museum world and the curators and the big shows, they're looking for and adding to voices of religious artists or voices that echo the religious world. And I think
that brings me to a very interesting question for me, because I'm sorry, did you want to
no.
something?
I think no, please go ahead.
So it's just brought me to think that in the last Jerusalem Biennale, you took a subject which was very universal, like the climate change. And you went to Venice with a few amazing artists. And you created this project that I thought was so powerful and wonderful because it took a very universal subject, global change, but it did kind of tackled it from a Jewish perspective with this amazing zine and all the articles around it, and you connected two worlds in a way. So do you think Judaism has anything to say about the COVID and about the social distancing? or it's just a universal thing and that's the way we should think about it?
So as politically incorrect as it might be, I think Judaism has something to say about everything. I believe that Judaism has plenty to say about this virus and about how we're meant to live. And I imagine it's going to be the subject of multiple sermons in synagogues all over the world when everybody eventually goes back to shul.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really should give credit where credit is due. I mean, the whole climate change project was basically Shaul Bassi from Bet Venezia, from the Home for Jewish Culture in Venice. It was his idea. And we just kind of ran with it and turned it into something bigger. But I think that Judaism is so wise and so old and so deep that I think, you know, if you just start poking around, you find inspiration and models of behavior. Everything is there, but you have to be willing to, you know, to look, and you have to be willing to give credit where credit is due. I mean, I think that's why the Biennale is so important.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so let's, we have 2 questions on the chat. Can we do that now? Maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Morton Langdown. I hope I say the name.
Yeah, Morty.
Correctly. Morty is asking, how has it been to have been separated from your printmaking? That's been such a pillar of your practice. Are you anxious to return to it? Or are you realizing that you are appreciating some other media that you're using? You have often seemed to minimize your gifts as a watercolorist.
Hi, Morty. Thank you. So first of all, Morty's right. I mean, once a week for the last 20 years, I've gone to the Jerusalem Print Workshop to do my etchings. Etchings involve nitric acid and all kinds of toxic substances and a big ventilator, and so I don't do it at home. I go there to do my etchings, and it's a huge part of my practice. So there's 2 things that I have not heard one word about when it might reopen. And there's 2 very scary issues about going back there. One is that the brilliant, amazing director of the print workshop is, I think Arik is 84 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's hugely at risk. And the other is that the print workshop sits at the entrance of Mea Sharim, which is one of the worst hotspots of COVID in the whole city. So I don't know when I'm going to go back there. I mean, I miss it terribly. And it's also really weird because I was in the middle of 3 or 4 different etching plates. I don't know if I'm even going to go back and remember like where I was in the process. I miss it, but there's also kind of, I mean, again, I'll go back to what you and I talked about at the beginning, the slowing down and the having time. There is something nice about saying, okay, you know, I just have to take that whole practice and put it over here for a while. And now I can focus on drawing and watercolors and making a mobile out of junk sitting around my studio. But I do miss it, and I am worried. But there's a lot of very specific issues about going back to that place where it is.
Okay. Ken Goldman is asking, could you ask Andi if she would like to share a bit of her sketchbook process that stands on its own, but also introduces future ideas?
Hi, Kenny. So I do have a very dedicated art journaling practice. In the beginning, it was just a way of getting ideas down with a big growing family and not a lot of time. And it was a way of recording things so that one day I could come back to them. Now in my maturity, it is a way of writing things down so I don't forget them. Because if I don't write it down, it just disappears. I have one of my journals sitting here. I don't know if you can see it, but I work in these notebooks.
So I'm moving to speaker view, and hopefully,
What?
Yeah, I think people can see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is how I work, and I take it with me everywhere I go. Let's see, can you see? Yeah, that's better. The truth is, you would think I would be working in this every day now, but I think that I'm actually, deeply involved in drawing and painting and making things. And I'm not juggling so many things at once. Usually I'm juggling, there's some of the little snippets of things I've been working on. Anyway, usually I'm juggling a lot of things at one time. And so this is a way of recording those ideas and keeping everything kind of all the balls in the air. But right now I'm really spending a lot of time finishing things up. And here you can even see the beginnings of the osteoporosis.
We could see a few examples of things that started as an idea, as in a sketch, and became like an artwork.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in here. And for me, this is a oh, here's a little COVID thing.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you show this one again?
Yeah, I mean it's I took the world.
Wow.
And gave the world the virus. I mean, there's my sketch page for the mobile. I mean, I tend to percolate ideas for a long time, and I work on them, and I take notes, and I think sketchbooks are very important for artists.
And I don't know if that's your technique, but we spoke about it before that, we both agreed that artists sometimes have some kind of ability to see something that people do not see. I wouldn't say profits, maybe that's like a strong word, but sometimes you feel like art is always ahead of the curve. Like people go to art shows and see something that a few months or a few years later becomes a reality. So is your process can tell us something about the future?
So first of all, I'm just going to say that there's an amazing book called Art and Physics that anyone that's interested in what we're talking about right now should read. And it was written by a doctor in California who took his grandchild to the museum and stood in front of a Jackson Pollock. And the little grandchild said, Grandpa, what is this painting about? And he had no idea. And he decided that he needed to try to understand this. And the entire book basically charts the history of art, starting with Giotto, and it tracks the parallels between science and art, and how the artists were always just a little bit ahead of the curve of science, of each major breakthrough in science and ways that our world changed. And so I do think that there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, I think that artists live in the world and they respond to the world in an immediate way. I mean, it may be that, it takes 10 years for that work to make its way to an art gallery or to a larger public. But every artist that I know, I mean, Kenny's part of the group. I mean, he's currently making amazing carvings that deal with the virus. Like, we're all responding instantaneously to what's going on around us. But I think in terms of what's seen by the public, I mean, everybody needs to remember that museums work 5 to 7 years in advance. Mm-hmm. So even if all of us are doing something incredible that's museum worthy, it might be 10 years before there's an organized exhibition that the work that we're doing appears anywhere. But I do think there's an element of prophecy, maybe not prophecy, but certainly relevance and immediacy. Because I think that's what artists do. All of us are, I mean, look, I'm dealing with the cellular way these things look. Another artist may be dealing with solitude and loneliness and, I mean, there's all, this is so big, this thing that's happened to humankind. And there's so many ways to enter it. But I think you're going to see a huge outpouring, a rich variety of art that's come out of this. I mean, not everybody. Also, listen, escapism is also relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people that are in their studios painting fantasy worlds is also a response to COVID.
Yeah, basically artists I would say, are people that have very sensitive sensors. And the language, which is a visual language, it's not like words. Sometimes words, it's harder to phrase something in a word. Sometimes just like the sensitive sensors and the ability to create a visual enable artists to project something earlier, or even in a deeper way or a broader way. But then again, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen in the world in general in 1 year or 2 years from now, but specifically in the contemporary art world. Like, what would the Jerusalem Biennale 2021 look like? So we're set to open the 5th edition in October 2021. And basically this whole series of talks started because I wanted artists to share with me their notions about what's going to be, what should I prepare, what should I do different than what I did so far. Do you have any advice for me?
Well, I think Judaism is full of brachot that celebrates working bodies, healthy bodies. I mean, I think there's all kinds of ways through a Jewish lens of looking at medicine, health, the body, family, community, the idea that you can't have a minion. I mean, there's a million ways that I'm just standing on one leg here. There's a million ways that I can think of that you could create a theme. I think though, I listened to the Biennale interview at 5 with Bodhi, and he said something that I loved, which he was talking about how museums and galleries and the experience of seeing art may change. And he talked about how it may be more regulated. You may not allow massive crowds. And you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think seeing art in a quieter setting with less people. I mean, I know everybody loves a buzz and an opening and all those kind of things, but maybe it's a more controlled environment, and maybe it's a more intimate and a slower and a quieter process. And I'm not sure that's bad. I have no doubts that you're going to come up with a great theme.
Okay, thank you.
I know you will.
I hope so.
You will.
I really, really hope so. And in a way, I agree with you. I don't think I thought about it early in the past, but maybe this more regulated scenario will allow us to shift some focus from the party to the art. Like, okay, so we won't have like 800 people
right.
in an opening event, but
right.
we'll have
right.
a better way to look at the art and to really give it the attention.
Well, and you've got a precedent. I mean, the way we're all behaving now, I think whereas, out of the blue saying, no, I'm sorry, we're not having a big opening party. And, we're only allowing 25 people into the gallery at a time. Everybody would have gone, what? But I think that if you did that now, everybody would go, oh, mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I think that was an amazing talk. I enjoyed it so much. I learned a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Rami. Always thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Oh, wait, we forgot to do something very important, Rami.
Yeah, go for it.
We were going to talk about Helene, I alone.
Yeah.
We were going to mention Helene because there is also tonight, I think at the same time, there was some kind of a Zoom, like a shloshim, an event celebrating her life and art. And I mean, Helene participated in some of the biennales, and Helene and I think Kenny, we were all in Matronita, and we lost somebody amazing this year. I mean, she was the doyen, the diva, the matriarch of Jewish feminist art. Mm-hmm. And she's somebody very special. And I just now remember that you and I were going to mention her tonight.
Yeah, that was on our schedule. I'm sorry, it's my memory problems.
We did it though.
Yeah, Helene Ailon participated in 2015 as part of the Jewish Art Salon exhibition that we had in Van Leer. And then in 2017, in another project, a video installation that was in the Asirei HaMachtarot Museum. Both projects, by the way, were created by David Sperber and Dvora Lis. And yeah, I agree. We lost a major artist.
Yeah.
So with this note, I'm going to wish you a very fruitful time, a lot of good work, new ideas, new projects. And I'm going to wish everyone good health and good art projects that we're able to meet and see art in real life. If anyone wants to say anything, that's really a good time. Please share with us your thoughts.
Thank you, Andy. So nice to hear from you and from Rami. Rami, I was just thinking that one of the things that this situation has brought about is more sort of Zoom in my house, activities that I can participate in that I might not normally have done. And I'm just thinking how that could affect the Biennale is that, more people could be access people who maybe can't get out late at night or who have little children. There might be ways that the Biennale can reach more people.
Yeah, I agree. And it came up in a few of the talks so far that the whole online phenomena is helping to reach out broader. But unfortunately, most of us agree that something in the experience is not complete. It's not as. But I started really I started with hating the whole concept of online talks about art and gallery visits online, and I really started by hating it, and in a way I'm getting used to the idea, and I started this conversation by saying that I really enjoy those series. I don't think it can replace anything like visiting a gallery, visiting a museum, but it is something that we can pull the good thing out of and use, and I agree that it helps a lot of people to take part. People that wouldn't be able to come to the gallery or to come to the museum, and now are able to sit in their living room and hear us and see the art. Yeah, so there's good and bad. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful session.
Thanks, Evie.
Thanks, Evie. How are you?
On the 23rd floor for 2 months, not having had a meal with a living person, not having touched anyone but my neighbor's dog. But you know, in my natural habitat, my kitchen, a lot. You know, my delivered, I cook, and then my daughter takes it and takes it down to the grandchildren. It's a whole new experience.
Wait, you're cooking for your children and grandchildren?
Yeah, for the ones who live in the building. Yeah.
That works.
Sending packages, and my granddaughter's wedding is called off, so I'm actually FedExing her. They're getting married, just the two of them and the parents. My son got a one-day officiant's license so that they can get married the day they want to, and then they'll make a wedding party whenever. And so in the meantime, I made a cake that's frozen. I finished a tablecloth that I started in 1963 embroidery, and actually ironed it, which for me is a huge thing. And I'm FedExing it to them and trying to get them edible flowers to put on the cake, FedEx to them. And we'll see. It's a whole different adventure. And I cleared out a lot of old papers. And,
Me too.
Yeah. I got rid of 6 bags of old papers, the plumber's bill from the old apartment, medical records that are totally non-relevant, whatever. And, you know, busy but crazy, and it is very difficult not to really interact with live people. But
Effie, can I ask you how do you see the developments in the art world now? Like, what would you think
I see
would
that
happen?
everything is going to be back so slowly. I see, first of all, it's art, it's theater, it's restaurants, it's all kinds of things on which we counted and which are taking a hit, a direct hit financially, but then other people are getting hit financially. So when will you have the money to go back to a nice restaurant? When will you, you know, it sounds very strange, but they did a survey of the clothing that people are buying online. They're buying tops. No one's buying bottoms because you're on Zoom. I mean, it sounds funny. But there's a great economic repercussion to all of that.
That's very funny.
To all the stores, you know. The fact is that you've now been sitting with your own closet. Now you're probably pretty bored with this. You probably keep wearing what you wore 2 days ago and not going into the back of the closet. But you're going to find that you have all these clothes. Are you going to buy more clothes?
Are you going to fit into those clothes? Yeah,
somebody said that you're supposed to do exercise going from the refrigerator to the counter, the couch may not count. But by the way, Batsheva is doing Gaga lessons online, and that's really cool. So, I mean, that's the only thing that I can wiggle around doing. I shut off my video, but I think it's going to be very difficult. How long until people feel secure walking into a museum? A gallery is smaller, a gallery can control. You won't have an opening with 100 people. You'll invite people, you know, timed visits, you know, like from 2 to 4 on Thursday, and somebody else 4 to 6. People will make appointments. It gives artists a lot of time to paint or do their work now, but it's economically, it's really going to be very, very difficult. Theater, how long until someone's going to sit in a theater, and how long until actors can act without a mask and be near one another? You know, so we're and the strangest thing is that everybody is concerned with manicures. That seems to be the first in the states where the morons in Georgia are reopening. The first thing they open are the spas, the hairdressers, and the manicurists, which is like 2 inches from your face. It's crazy. But
I thought that the museums are something that they could open up so easily. Like you just go to a McCullough and everybody's packed into it. I was in downtown today and people are jammed in these little stores. So a museum seems like the most obvious thing.
right,
to
but
be
they
able to
but they
open
really
up.
need the food, and presumably in New York, at least in the groceries now, you're required to have a mask, but you really need the food. Till
Oh,
you
but
feel
downtown, every store was open today. Everything.
Yeah.
well
Everything's
here
open.
here we
Closed.
haven't opened yet.
Where
I mean,
is Evelyn? Where are you?
I'm in New York. I mean, in
Oh,
New York,
okay.
I mean, I'm in the center of the the petri
Right,
dish here. I mean,
right.
So's Morty and so's Carolyn. They're all in New York.
Mhm.
yeah, right. So next to a cruise ship, we're in like the the hottest spot. The question is, when will people feel the leisure? When will they have the 40 shekel to go to the museum?
Well, that's the other piece. That's the other
which is the other piece. Is
Yeah.
that where, when they have 40 shekel, is that the first place they're going to spend it? How long down the road? So in terms of it's really going to be rough,
Yeah.
I wonder if the movie theaters are going to open up for a year. And there's my brother-in-law is a very big time infectious diseases professor who says it's coming back in the fall. So it's a really long. And what is the demographic of people who go to museum? What is the proportion of people who are at older and at risk?
Andy, it's Carolyn. I want
Hi.
to say hi. Unfortunately, it's going to be a while before I get to see some of your new work, but I am sitting here in my apartment enjoying the 2 pieces of yours that I have. I'll just put them up here so everybody can see them.
Thank you.
I enjoy them. I enjoy them every day. So it's nice to hear your words and see your face, in addition to enjoying your beautiful art in my home.
Maybe that's like also a positive point about being at home. More people will buy good art because they spend more hours at home.
From your mouth to God's ears, Ron.
So here's
a coat for Chicken Little.
yes, it's a coat, a dress for Chicken Little.
I'm happy to see that.
So I pass it back and forth a few 100 times a day and pick out a different word.
Yeah, it's terribly relevant, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. We are.
Thank you, Rami.
Be well.
Just tomorrow, give me a minute for a promotion. Tomorrow at the same time, 9 p.m. Jerusalem time. We're speaking with Jacqueline Nichols from London. Also, probably most of you know her, a brilliant artist that will tell us a little bit about what happens in London, but also what happens with her own work. And on Tuesday, we'll have Andrea Socrati from Ancona, Italy, and Wednesday, Andrea Ostrich from Budapest. So if you're interested and you have the time, please be with us.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rami.
Thank you for a good session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.